I wasn't planning to be there that late. The office lights hummed in that way they only do when most of the building has emptied out, each floor thinning down to just a few stubborn holdouts. My desk was cluttered with printouts I hadn't really touched, coffee cooling in a paper cup I'd refilled twice just to stay upright. She was still there, across the hall in her office door cracked open. Her lamp threw a warmer light than the rest of the place, made her space feel like somewhere you could exhale. I caught myself looking over more than once, though I tried to make it seem accidental, like I was stretching, or checking the time. Her name was Claire. Mid-40s, sharp when she spoke, but not unkind. My assigned lawyer for a case I still didn't fully understand, some paperwork thing tied to my father's estate. I was 23 and mostly clueless, just nodding along in meetings and pretending I knew what revocable trust meant. We weren't friends, not really. But she remembered things I said in passing. Like how I took my coffee black even though I hated it, or how I was always late because my apartment was 3 bus transfers away. She'd glance at me during a lull in conversation and ask, "Made it on time today?" in that half-teasing way that felt sharper than a joke but softer than judgment. Tonight, though, there was no meeting. I was just filing documents for the junior partner who dumped them on me. Claire must have had her own stack of late work. Our hallways were quiet enough that I could hear her stapler click, papers shuffled. At some point, she stood in her doorway with a folder in her hand. "Still here?" I looked up too quickly, bumping my pen off the desk. Yeah? Almost done." She nodded, leaned against the frame like she wasn't in a hurry. "You're always almost done." I laughed once, not sure if it was meant as a jab. "Guess so." There was a silence then, long enough that I folded the corner of my notepad just to do something with my hands. When I glanced up again, she was still watching me, head tilted slightly, as though she was trying to decide something. "Do you eat?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. Sometimes." Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "That's not an answer." I shrugged. "Depends what's in the fridge." "Which is usually nothing." She shook her head like she'd expected that. Then, almost softer, "You'll burn out fast if you keep this up." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She let it hang, then pushed off the frame and disappeared back into her office. The sound of her door easing shut was sharper than it should have been. I sat there another half hour, staring at the same paragraph of text I hadn't processed. My phone lit up twice, group chat pings I ignored. I typed half a message to someone I hadn't talked to in months, then deleted it. My coffee had gone cold again. When I finally started packing up, sliding papers back into their folder, I noticed something on the corner of my desk. A small yellow post-it, stuck there clean as if it had been waiting the whole time. In her handwriting, neat but slanted, it read, "Stay after hours." "I'll explain." "See." I just stared at it, the empty office buzzing around me, wondering when exactly she'd left it there. And why. That post-it sat in my pocket all evening, folded and unfolded until the corners wore soft. I didn't know if she'd meant it as an invitation or a warning. But the next night, when everyone else drifted out and the office fell into its usual after-hours hush, I found myself lingering again, slower this time. My tasks finished earlier than they should have. I stacked papers twice, wiped down a desk I didn't need to touch, anything to keep me there. Her light was on again. That same warm glow spilling out of her office. I heard the faint clink of a mug. My throat went dry just thinking of knocking. Before I could decide, her voice floated across the hall. "You're here again." I turned, pretending surprise. "Guess so." She set her pen down, leaned back in her chair. "Sit. You look restless." I did, though my legs felt stiff. Her office smelled faintly of Earl Grey, steam curling from a chipped mug at the edge of her desk. She noticed me glancing at it, and pushed another one forward, already poured. "I don't usually," I began. "Try it," she said. Not sharp. Just steady. The tea was stronger than I expected, a little bitter. I hid my reaction by staring at the framed photo on her shelf. 2 kids, teenagers maybe, their arms thrown around each other at some graduation ceremony. "They're older now," she said, following my eyes. "College. Out of the house." I nodded, unsure what else to say. She filled the silence herself. "You think that makes things easier, but it doesn't. Just different kind of quiet." I felt the weight of that. My own apartment was quiet in a different way, half-finished dishes, phone calls ignored. I almost told her that, but stopped. She didn't need to hear about my half-life. She sipped her tea, then tilted her head. "You remind me of my son's friend. He was always eager, but never really settled. Like he was waiting for the ground to form under him." That hit sharper than it should have. I stared into my mug, watching the surface tremble slightly in my hands. "Maybe I'm still waiting," I said before I could stop myself. Her gaze lingered, soft but unreadable. I felt it in the way you feel heat from a lamp, steady too close. "Careful," she murmured. Not unkind. Almost like a warning to herself. The room felt smaller after that. I filled the air with questions about her work, her cases, anything to shift the weight. She humored me, even laughed once when I asked if lawyers ever just made things up for fun. "That's politicians," she said dryly, and I caught myself smiling longer than I should have. When it was finally time to leave, I stood awkwardly, mug still warm in my hand. She reached to take it back, her fingers brushing mine for half a second longer than necessary. It wasn't a grab, or even a hold. Just a contact, skin meeting skin, and then gone. But my chest tightened all the same. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next week blurred. Work, buses, the same gray mornings. But every evening I caught myself watching the hall, waiting to see if her light would still be on. It was. More often than not. Sometimes I passed by with just a nod, kept walking to the elevators before I said something I shouldn't. Other nights I'd stop, hover in her doorway like I wasn't sure if I'd been invited or not. She never said no. But she never said yes either. Just that flick of her hand toward the chair, or the way she'd slide an extra cup across the desk like it had been waiting. It should have been simple. Tea. Quiet conversation. But it wasn't. One evening, I was halfway through telling her some story about missing my stop on the bus when the door clicked open behind us. A junior associate, my age, maybe younger, poked his head in, froze at the sight of me sitting across from her. Sorry, Ms. Lawrence. I didn't realize." She straightened too quickly, her voice sharper than usual. "It's fine, Tyler. What do you need?" His eyes darted between us, something flickering there I didn't like. "Just signatures." He dropped the folder on her desk, didn't even look at me again before leaving. The silence after he closed the door was different. Heavy. She avoided my eyes, flipping through pages with more force than necessary. I tried to laugh it off. "Guess I look like trouble." Her pen paused mid-mark. She didn't look up. "People notice things. They misinterpret." The word stung, though I knew she was right. My hands went still in my lap. I thought of her son's friend, the one she said I reminded her of, and for a second, I hated the comparison. Maybe I should. I started but couldn't finish. Her eyes finally met mine. Tired. Soft but edged. Maybe. That should have been the end. I should have stood up, walked out, let the door close behind me. But I didn't. Either of us moved. Instead, I noticed her hand resting on the desk, thumb rubbing lightly against the edge of her mug. A restless, unconscious movement. My own fingers tapped against my knee, out of sync, like I was keeping time with something only I could hear. She set the pen down, leaned back. "You're too young to sit in offices this late. You should be out, anywhere else." I swallowed. "And you?" Her mouth curved, sad, almost. I ran out of excuses years ago. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking down the hall. She didn't move. Neither did I. Just that space between us, shrinking without either of us touching it. When I finally stood, it felt wrong, like breaking something fragile. I handed her the empty mug, fingers brushing hers again, slower this time. She didn't pull away. Not right away. And for half a second, just half, I thought she might lean closer. But she didn't. Not yet. It happened outside the office. By accident. We both left late, same time for once. The lobby was already dim, security guard half asleep behind his desk. She nodded toward the street. You heading that way? I was. So we walked. The city felt different at that hour, emptier, softer. Streetlights humming, shop windows dark. Our footsteps echoed, too loud. I shoved my hands in my pockets just to stop them from fidgeting. We didn't talk at first. Just walked. She carried herself like she was used to silence, like she didn't need to fill it. But I did. You ever think about leaving? I asked, surprising myself. She glanced over. The firm? Everything. The whole picture. Her mouth tugged to the side. When I was your age, I did. Thought about running off to California or Spain. Some place where nobody knew me. And now? She exhaled through her nose. Now I have roots. Even if they don't hold as tight as they used to. We stopped at the corner where her car was parked. She leaned against it, arms folded. I stayed a step back, not sure if I was supposed to keep going or wait. You're restless, she said finally. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I just... My voice trailed. I didn't want to say too much. But it was there, hanging between us anyway. Her eyes softened, but there was steel under it. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something you're supposed to fix yourself with. The words hit harder than I expected. I looked down, scuffed my shoe against the curb. That's not... I stopped. It was, a little. She wasn't wrong. Her arms dropped, hands finding her keys, but she didn't move to unlock the car. You remind me too much of when I still thought I had choices. It's dangerous. The honesty in her voice made my chest tighten. Not sharp, just heavy. Dangerous for who? I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Just studied me, like she was measuring how far I might go, or how far she'd let me. The silence stretched. I thought about telling her everything, how the nights felt less empty because of her, how I waited for her light to be on, how her quiet attention steadied something I hadn't realized was shaking. Instead, all I managed was, I don't really have anyone who notices me. Her face shifted, just slightly. She closed her eyes for a second, like the admission landed too close. When she opened them again, her hand moved, just enough to brush the sleeve of my jacket. Barely a touch. More a test. I didn't move. Couldn't. She pulled her hand back slowly, but the air between us felt changed, charged in a way that made my breath catch. Her keys clinked in her palm. She looked at me, steady, tired, conflicted. Then, almost a whisper, What are we doing? The night at her car lingered in me longer than it should have. That near touch, that question, what are we doing, echoed louder than anything else. But the next evening, her office was dark. I told myself she'd left early. Or maybe she wasn't working late that night. Still, the absence gnawed at me. I stayed longer than I needed to, waiting, papers shuffled just to pass the time. Nothing. The following night, same thing. Dark office. No warm light spilling across the hall. By the third night, I started doubting if I'd imagined it all. Maybe that look in her eyes hadn't been what I thought. Maybe I'd read too much into the silence, into her hand brushing my sleeve. The hall felt colder without her lamp. On the fourth day, she was there again, but different. Door closed, blinds drawn. When I passed, she barely glanced up. No wave toward the chair, no second mug waiting. Just a clipped nod, eyes fixed back on her work. I hovered anyway, waiting for some sign. Evening, I said, too soft. She murmured. Pen scratching. I almost laughed at myself then, standing there like a kid waiting outside a classroom. I left without another word. The distance grew fast after that. No tea. No quiet talks. If I caught her eye in the hall, she smiled politely, nothing more. Like we'd never shared those late nights, those confessions between lines. It wasn't anger. It was worse, neutral. I thought about knocking, about asking outright. But each time, I pictured her face, tired, resigned, and my hand fell back to my side. One night, I opened my phone, thumb hovering over a blank message thread with her number at the top. I typed, "Did I do something wrong?" Deleted it. Typed, "I miss our talks." Deleted that too. In the end, I left the screen blank, set it face down on the table. A week later, in the break room, I overheard her talking quietly on the phone. Her voice was softer, careful. "Yes," I told him. "No, I don't think he understands yet." A pause. Then, "No, he doesn't know about you." I left before she could see me. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling trying to piece it together. Was it an ex? Someone still in her life? A new someone? The thought knotted in my chest, not heartbreak, not quite jealousy. Just something unfinished. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next evening, I took the bus straight home. Walked past the building without looking up at her window. I told myself it was better this way. But when I sat down at my desk later, the other chair across from me, empty, waiting, felt louder than any silence I'd ever known. And still, I didn't knock. I hadn't expected to see her outside the office again. It was a Saturday morning, the street near empty, drizzle smudging the sidewalks. I ducked into the corner coffee shop to escape the rain, and there she was, already seated, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. She saw me before I could pretend not to notice. For a second, I thought she might look away. But instead, she gave the smallest nod, enough to make me cross the room. I sat down without asking. My jacket dripped onto the floor. "You don't usually come here," I said. "Neither do you," she replied. Silence settled, heavy but not unfriendly. I fiddled with the sugar packets, stacked and unstacked them. She watched, quiet, until finally she set her mug down with a soft clink. "I should apologize," she said. "For what?" "For pulling back." Without explaining. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tapped once against the rim of the cup, betraying the nerves underneath. "It wasn't fair." I swallowed. "You don't owe me anything." Her eyes lifted to mine then, sharp in their honesty. "Maybe not. But you deserve to know it wasn't you. It's just me. My life. The mess of it." I nodded, though part of me wanted more. "I heard you that day. On the phone." She froze. Then exhaled. "My ex-husband. He thinks I haven't told my kids everything yet. He's right. I haven't. I'm still figuring out how to." Something loosened in me, though it didn't make it easier. "So where does that leave us?" Her gaze softened, but there was weight behind it. "That's what I've been afraid to ask." The drizzle outside thickened, rain threading down the glass beside us. People walked past under umbrellas, the world moving on like we weren't sitting in a pause that had stretched too long. "I wait for your light," I said finally. Quiet, almost to myself. "Every night. Even when I tell myself I won't." Her eyes flickered, something breaking in them. She leaned back, hands tightening on her mug. "You can't build your nights around me." "I know," I admitted. "But I do." The air between us seemed to hum. She looked away, then back, as if caught between pulling me closer and pushing me off entirely. "I don't know if I can give you what you think you want," she whispered. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "I don't want everything. I just don't want to feel invisible again." Her breath caught sharp in her throat. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached across the table, fingers brushing mine, not a grip, not a claim. Just contact. We both stared at our hands, joined lightly, like testing the weight of it. Either of us smiled. Either of us cried. Just that quiet touch, and her soft exhale. Okay, she said. Time didn't change everything at once. It was slower than that, more ordinary. After the coffee shop, we didn't suddenly shift into something defined. We still had our silences, our pauses, our careful steps. But they softened. Sometimes, she'd invite me in after work, not for tea at her office, but her kitchen. The kettle whistling, the chipped mugs the same ones she'd had for years. She'd hand me mine without asking how I took it, and I'd drink it even when it was too strong. Other nights, we'd sit on the small bench outside her building, the one by the crooked lamppost. Once, I checked my phone without thinking. It read 8:47 p.m. Somehow that number stuck with me, like a private marker of the time we first sat there long enough to forget the world moving past us. It wasn't dramatic. No one else noticed. But the distance that had once stretched wide between us became something manageable. Her kids came home for holidays. I met them, briefly, just another neighbor, in the hall. She didn't explain more, and I didn't ask. Maybe one day. Not yet. The firm stayed the same, long hours, buzzing lights, but now, the empty hallway didn't feel quite so hollow. Some nights her door was closed, but I knew it wasn't shutting me out anymore. We never said love. Not once. But in the way she touched my wrist lightly when pouring me tea, in the way she asked if I'd eaten, in the way she lingered at the bench even when the air got cold, I knew. And maybe she did too, in the way I showed up, steady, in how I carried the weight without asking her to name it. One evening, weeks later, I caught myself watching her pour black coffee into a thermos. She handed it to me without a word, though she knew I didn't like it. I laughed quietly, shook my head, but took it anyway. Still pretending you like it? She teased, the corner of her mouth lifting. Still pretending you don't notice? I answered. That was us, never big speeches, just small threads weaving into something sturdier. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be. But it felt less like something paused, unfinished, and more like a sentence finally moving forward. The last thing I remember from that night was sitting beside her on the bench, shoulders brushing, both of us quiet. The streetlight buzzed above us, the world dim and ordinary. She glanced at me once, just briefly, then looked away again. And I thought, this is enough. No declarations. No endings. Just enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?